Hi again. So now we're going to be talking about relative clauses. And basically, a clause is just a part of a sentence that cannot stand alone. And the clauses often has a subject and a verb, which we know every true sentence must have. However, the clause is a fragment. It can't stand alone. It can't form a true sentence alone. So a relative clause is a clause that as a whole acts as an adjective modifying a noun. And that noun is also called an antecedent in this case. So let me write that down. Clause modifying antecedent. Okay. So it modifies an antecedent, and a relative clause in Latin must start with a relative pronoun that was covered in the relative pronoun video. Relative pronoun introduces a relative clause. So first, let's start with some English examples so you get a full picture of what exactly a relative clause is. And I'll give you the example of the girl who volunteers is very kind. So the area that I'm marking off right now with parentheses is your relative clause. And the word that I'm going to circle is the relative pronoun. Let me do a different color. Relative pronoun and your relative clause. And now notice how this entire clause seems to act as an adjective modifying girl. So which girl? The girl who volunteers. So thus the antecedent would be the girl. Okay, so another example that I'll show you is we will see the land whose flowers are pretty. Okay, so whose flowers are beautiful has a subject and verb. Flowers is the subject and pretty is the verb, excuse me. Let me mark this off first as the relative clause. And the whose as the relative pronoun. So it has a subject and a verb, but it can't stand alone. And again, the antecedent is the noun who is being modified. So, whose flowers were they? They were the lambs. Okay, so in Latin, there are just two things that you need to remember about relative clauses. So, two key rules. Let's scroll down a little. And first of all, the case of the relative pronoun, I abbreviated that, comes from the relative clause. Okay, and second of all, the gender and the number of the relative pronoun, again, come from the antecedent. So basically, what that means for the sentence I just gave you is that the relative pronoun would be feminine singular in this sentence because the antecedent is land. So this would be feminine. It would be singular because land is feminine singular as well. But the relative pronoun would be genitive because the clause is genitive because it shows possession. If it helps you understand better, you can make the sentence, we will see the land of whom the flowers are beautiful, if that helps you make more sense of it. So if you remember those two rules and you know your relative pronouns, you should be good. And I know that the concept of matching case of the relative pronoun to how it functions as a relative clause is kind of confusing, but it just takes practice.